So today we have a special guest joining us. He is one of the stars of the Amazon original series The Tick, co-host of the podcast Blank Check with Griffin and David. Welcome, Griffin Newman, to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here, like a proper, legitimate superhero. On the show.
Well, legally, I'm only allowed to file taxes as a sidekick.
Fair.
But I'm in the realm.
Fair. I mean, Your name isn't in the title.
No, thanks for reminding me.
My first question for you. Mm-hmm. What is your take on the current state of the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
It's weird. I mean, I've watched your videos on the subject, and I feel like we have a similar relationship with them, where it's like, these are the movies I thought I wanted to see my entire childhood, and I am constantly confused and trying to interrogate why I feel so conflicted about them. Mm-hmm. There are things that I love. I go see every one of them opening weekend.
Yep.
And I'm usually left with this weird feeling of emptiness at the end of it. But it's also one of these things, I mean, it's not just what they've done for superhero storytelling, but how the rest of the entertainment industry has followed their lead of how you want to do long-form serialized storytelling and franchise building and all that sort of stuff. And no one's doing it as well as them. So I kind of can't question what they're doing.
Yeah.
In a certain way, because everyone else is trying and failing, which shows how difficult it is to pull off.
Right. That's what's weird about it, how they've become just like what everyone aspires to be.
Right.
And what I really wonder about it, because it is like, I think it's commendable and really impressive that they made it work.
I think so too. Yeah.
That it exists in the first place.
No, that's the thing. I mean, it's like, I with no hesitation say that, like, Kevin Feige is a genius and probably one of the most important voices in just narrative fiction of the last 15 years. Not even just filmmaking alone. Whatever my gripes are with any particular movie on a story level, it's like what he's pulled off is impossible. People thought it was impossible before he did it, and everyone who's tried to do it after he set out the roadmap has gotten lost somewhere in the woods. But I also feel like there's this weird sort of switch that's happening now that the Marvel Cinematic Universe embodies really well, where it feels like movies are becoming more like television is becoming more like film. Mm-hmm. And the Marvel movies are certainly setting that template of this is an event that you check in with on a regular calendar basis, and you want to go with your friends, and you want to spend your time theorizing about what's going to happen next, and then afterwards theorize about what's going to happen after. But I wonder where we're ultimately going.
That's a question that I ask myself a lot, because what I hear people bring up all the time is like, you have to really just look at these as like a TV show, and I got into this in the last video, where I don't think it entirely does work as like just one story, because like, for instance, there isn't really like a lead character on it. And so the question that I keep getting at is like, with the model they've built, can they make a like really great movie? I mean, like I said this before in a video, but like for me, my like high watermark when it comes to superhero movies is Spider-Man 2.
Yeah,
I'm just like, can they make a Spider-Man 2?
I don't know if they can make a movie that focused ever. There's something to like the storytelling simplicity of Spider-Man 2 in just sort of how streamlined it is, and how sort of in touch with its themes it is and coherent it is, which I think that's a byproduct of Sam Raimi has said he got a lot of freedom on that movie. He was surprised by how much freedom he got in the first Spider-Man movie, and because that worked, they gave him even more in the second one.
And it makes sense that they gave him way less on the third one?
Yes, exactly. That's how this industry works. I think there's that aspect which is hard to replicate, again, in a model that has so many overseers, and there's so much brand management a place. I mean, You want to talk about what works really well about the Marvel movies. I constantly come with this comparison to fast food restaurants and chain restaurants, where it's like, it is incredible that you can franchise something across the globe and maintain quality control. Mm-hmm. That you can go to France, or you can go to Boise, or you can go to Namibia, and a Big Mac is pretty much going to taste the same.
I will say, in my personal experience, McDonald's in Prague weirdly tastes better and has cooler options there
I'll say this.
than we do here.
So there's that sort of variation.
Yeah.
Hey, regionally they like this more. Mm-hmm. Culturally, this item isn't as used. So there's a little bit of fluctuation.
Right.
But they're all basically working on the same thing. And someone at the top has to make sure that if they introduce a new menu item, it will taste pretty much the same anywhere you go.
Right.
Which is incredible. That shouldn't be possible. The negative is that sets a pretty low ceiling on how good any food item can be.
I think that's a pretty good analogy.
Because you're not allowing anyone to experiment anymore on the ground. You're allowing one person in a lab to create something that they know they can control. Mm-hmm. That will be super satisfying. There's a reason I always want to get fast food at 2 o'clock in the morning when I'm drunk. There's a reason. And I feel so good when I'm eating it, and I feel a little crappy afterwards. Mm-hmm. And I feel that way with not just the Marvel movies, but with this sort of franchise-driven filmmaking of, we can't just make a movie that works on its own. The movie has to be a payoff for the movie that came before it and a teaser for the movie that's going to come next. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I feel like, there's a lot of talk about why, people don't go to the movies as much anymore, and
right.
they're less likely to take a chance on a new idea, and
right.
And there's reason that the Marvel movies keep doing so well because they are a sure thing.
Yes, and that they've successfully built it into an event. I mean, I feel like the way that people watch Marvel movies is weirdly more similar to how people engage with sports, where it's like you talk to fans, and at this point, almost everyone is a fan of some faction of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Right.
There's this weird thing where you'll meet people and they'll be like, I just only like the Thor movies. Mm-hmm. And there are the people who are in on everything and love it, and the people who see them all out of obligation. But there's this feeling of, I just have to keep up to date with them. I don't want to miss a game, because it's all feeding into a larger narrative of where we're going with the Super Bowl. I mean, I don't watch sports. And I think I was always kind of jealous of the sense of community that springs up around watching games as an event. Mm-hmm. Going to a bar where they support your home team, or your friends who you watch it with, or the person you're texting with as the game is going on, or any of that, and how much of it is what you bring to it. I've been a fan of this team forever. Mm-hmm. I know the narrative of this player who got drafted at this point and had this injury, and this is their comeback game. And the movies kind of ask you, the Marvel films at this point, to bring that sort of level to the films, but also to treat them as an event where it's about going the first weekend and wearing your shirt,
Yeah.
Who's your favorite character, and what do you think is going to happen, and what rumors have you read online, and are they going to be, checked off or not?
Right, and that... for me, that's and I probably similarly for you, because you're familiar with the comics and stuff like that.
Right, right.
You knew who these characters are before the movies.
Yeah.
And for my I guess not quite as deeply nerdy
Mm-hmm.
friends, suddenly in the sports way of they'll come to me with questions about who's this guy, and I heard that this person might show up, who's Adam Warlock? Explain that.
The weird trailer analysis, breaking down rumors based on merchandise leaks, and this stuff that people who I don't think of as being major movie fans, and especially not major comic book fans, are now so invested in. So what do you think of the rumor that this actor is actually playing this character? And it's that sort of the pre-gaming mm-hmm. of what you have to bring to the game, with these Avengers movies functioning as your sort of, World Series, your Super Bowls, your what have you.
Right.
But the weird thing is those movies are also now just tease up for the next season. There's never any sense of finality, because it's the thing has to keep going. You shift out players. Right. You might change the stadium, or you might change the uniforms. but it's like just about trying to get you to buy the season tickets.
Right, and that's why the TV comparison never quite worked for me, because TVs have like shows have season finales and like series finales and stuff like that, and I mean it doesn't. This I guess is like a 10-year long TV show, but now I'm curious because. So going into Endgame, which, to use the sports metaphor, is the World Series, it's the Super Bowl, it's the World Cup.
Sure.
It is essentially, I guess, what they say everything has been built into. Didn't Kevin Feige just coin it?
Yeah.
The Infinity Saga?
Yes, he did. But they also have said that every time. I mean, they said the Avengers was the thing we were building up to. And certainly Infinity War was sold as the thing we're building up to. And then I go to see that movie opening night, and I'm like, this feels like it's just a teaser for...
It is part one.
Right.
And so I'm really curious, because I'm curious about Endgame for a lot of reasons. And because in some way it's being positioned as, and has the potential to be, the thing that even like the comics can't really quite do, which is an ending.
Sure.
Because... the characters, like, even like when Captain America dies, that keeps going on and stuff like that, and then he comes back. But this this can be more of an ending than the comics ever really offer. And at the same time, the universe will still continue, the overarching story will continue, but this might be like an ending for... I mean, if nothing else, this is like... or could be a transition point.
I think it's a transition point, certainly. I don't think it's going to end with any sense of finality.
Right.
I mean, as much as he's now saying this was all the Infinity Saga, I don't think they're going to close any book pretty firmly. I think there'll be a transition. I think we might end certain plot lines or characters. But certainly he cannot leave people feeling like they're full. Because I think that's a big part of it is... the movies can't give you a sense of complete dramatic fulfillment.
Yeah.
Because they constantly need to leave you wanting more in some area or another. Whether it's the next adventure of that character you've been following, or the other character who is teed up in this movie who's going to get their own spinoff, or whatever it is. It's like you got to stay on the conveyor belt.
Right.
Which is pretty, I mean, it's easier said than done. And you get into the McDonald's thing where it's like, you compare like a Big Mac versus like, someone's homemade burger on the barbecue. And in certain ways, eating a Big Mac is more satisfying because they have scientifically created the formula to make it as satisfying and just ping everything in your brain. They understand the food science.
Yeah.
Even if the burger itself is a richer thing and seems less exciting, the one that your dad made. That was something made with an intentionality just towards trying to give you a good meal versus the thing that's gonna make you wanna eat the Big Mac every single time. And Spider-Man 2 is a movie that just is like your dad making a burger.
Right.
It's just your dad nailed this burger, Right. And as big as any of these things feel, it's constantly like, well, the Big Mac's pinging me, and I want another one, but I also kind of feel bad that I just ate that last one.
And so, what would, best case scenario, what would you like to see Endgame do? This is a thing that I've been thinking about a lot recently.
That's a really good question. I mean, I walked out of Infinity War very frustrated, and I tend to like more of these movies than I dislike them. As much as I'm focusing on my reservations right now, on the whole, I like them.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I rewatched all of them.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of rewatching them all now.
Yeah, and most of them I hadn't watched since theaters, and I think there are only two that I just don't... There's only two that I think I gave a less than 3 out of 5 on Letterboxd.
Right, out of 20 now? 21?
Yeah, there's a lot of 3 out of 5s.
Right,
but,
same here. Right.
And I think, for me, it was only Incredible Hulk and Iron Man 2 that I was they don't really... I don't think they're very good. They're good.
Yes.
And the rest are all, for me, solid to very good.
Right. Well, I mean, so what would I like to see Endgame do? And it is interesting because they have been so elusive in all their marketing. I think because they know it's Endgame, everyone's going to go see it. Why ruin anything?
It's the most sure thing like movies have ever had.
And that's the most exciting thing for me is going into a film of that size with that little understanding of what's going to happen within it is exciting to me about the movie. But when you get to the basic like Spider-Man 2 Infinity War sort of comparison, I also go back to like, because we are both guys who were reading these comics for years and years and years and years before this universe existed, I would always buy the hype about the big events and the big crossover events where here's the main 12-part series, but also every other title is going to tie into it. So you have to double the amount of comics on your pull list on a weekly basis, because if you don't read this one, then you won't understand why that character showed up here. Yep. And I just buy it hook, line, and sinker, and it would end, and I wouldn't really feel very satisfied.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even really enjoying it while I was reading all those titles. It was like a sense of obligation.
I know with those events, the part that I always enjoyed the most was like the first 2 issues.
Right, just the setup.
Exactly. When it
the promise of the thing.
Yeah, when all of a sudden like we reveal, oh, the Skrulls have been here all along.
Right.
Or like Shield turns on Captain America, and right away it's like this seems like something new and like actually like change is going to happen. And then by the end you realize like, oh, this is just going to set up the next year's worth of stories until the next one.
Right. So that any of this sort of signaling about like, this is a massive event, this is going to change everything, the stakes have never been higher, that always feels kind of hollow to me, because there is a status quo to these characters that we want to see. I mean, you've talked about in your videos the Stan Lee concept of the illusion of change.
Yeah.
Right, that you want to make it feel like the characters are growing, but you can't get too far away from who they are, because you need to keep on telling stories about them for decades and decades and decades. And you can vary things up, but they're sort of central tenets to what make them so effective, and you don't want to get away from that.
Right.
So anytime everything is changed, you know it's only a matter of time before it's unchanged. So for me, I was always more into when you would have sort of after an event, maybe, okay, that writer is exhausted, they're taking a break, and now they have another team to fill in and do like 1 4-issue arc. And I would always prefer that arc, the thing after the big event that was, I just want to tell a small emotional story. This is about them facing some kind of personal crisis.
Right.
And here's a new villain or an old villain from the past, but whatever the actual superhero conflict is, it's mirroring some idea of this is what I want to say about this character, rather than using this character as a tool to disrupt the entire status quo of a universe.
What you're saying is that this is the exact reason that Guardians 2 is my favorite MCU movie.
Same here.
Because
that Iron Man 3, and I think they both fall into the same thing where they feel like a weird mini-series.
Right, as in like they're both the like the smaller story after the big one, where it's just like, let's just dig into these characters and have them go on like a little like small personal voyage that digs into who they are.
Right, and Iron Man 3 is a movie about Tony Stark trying to figure out if he can live without being Iron Man. Like this whole persona that has overwhelmed him and consumed him. And in theory, he's the top of the heap, but he's miserable and he's having panic attacks all the time.
Right.
And his like relationship is on the skids, and he's reevaluating every decision he's ever made in his life. And, you know, that was the first one post-Avengers, and everyone was saying, well, how are these movies going to work in a post-Avengers landscape? Why aren't they all in every movie now? If they know each other,
why don't they call each other in to solve their problems?
Anytime there's a problem, you know? But there's something kind of nice to going back to a small contained universe like that again, and having it be like, he wouldn't call Captain America, because this is just about him and his suits and a guy he flipped off like 25 years ago, which I kind of want out of these films. And they can still play into these larger narratives. I mean, I think Iron Man 3 is very smart about the way it uses the events of the Avengers and actually deals with the psychological fallout of what would actually happen to this guy post-Avengers.
Right.
But the problem is, every appearance of Iron Man after that, every appearance of Tony Stark works against Iron Man 3.
Exactly.
Iron Man 3 ends in this beautiful place of him being able to throw the arc reactor in the river and go like, I'm Iron Man, it's not the suit, it's not the thing. I'm the guy, and I found inner peace with myself, and I'm happy. And then that's immediately disrupted because Captain America needs something different out of him for his own movie, or Spider-Man needs something different out of him for his own movie, let alone the Avengers movies themselves. So when everything's always going to be sort of shaken and reset like an Etch-a-Sketch based on whatever status quo they need to maintain, I would rather the stories that have the emotional stakes than the stories that have the universe stakes.
Yeah.
Because the universe stakes being shaken, then I feel like, well, what happened here? Why did we spend our time setting up a change that's not going to actually stick?
Right.
Versus the story stakes of a character going through an emotional growth, I at least can hold on to that. Even after it's retconned or sort of ignored in the next 4 movies, I can go like, yeah, but that story in and of itself was satisfying.
Right. This is why I'm like, my ideal situation, like post Endgame, is I would like to see the crossover movies maybe just like once every 5 years.
Yeah.
And because when they happen as often as they do, I do think it hurts like the characters' solo movies.
Agreed.
And so like the thing that I'm really hoping for that I don't think will happen, like I don't think Marvel wants to start taking like risks because they know exactly what they're doing.
No, and also, why should they? I mean, here's the thing.
Right.
We can sit here on this couch and complain about whatever we wish the movies were doing in comparison to the comics we like the most. But why should they change a single thing? These movies are so satisfying to people and they make so much money.
Yeah.
You know?
It's the thing that really interests me is I assume that they're not going to, in Endgame, like straight up kill all of the original core characters.
No, 0% chance.
Right.
Right.
And so, but since this universe will continue for years to come, it's just, why would it stop? The comics don't stop, the MCU won't stop. At some point, there's going to come a moment in time when they've got to bring back, like Tony Stark will appear again, or Steve Rogers will appear again, and they will have to recast. And it's like, it is, like, I don't know when it'll happen, and I think when they do that, they will wait several years before, like, so that give people enough time to, like, maybe accept a new version. And because the tone and voice of the whole MCU has been very consistent for all of these things, and it's, it was largely like what was like defined in like the first Iron Man, and then like what Whedon added to it. But eventually there will have to be a new Tony Stark. I think that will happen, and I think when that happens, that will it'll be a point where like things will have to change. There will have to, like, they won't be able to just like mimic what Downey does. It'll have to be in the way of like maybe a new writer coming on after someone spent like 5 years like writing a series. There will have to be a new voice. And again, I'm not super optimistic, but I know that eventually has to happen, and I want to kind of like skip ahead to whenever it happens to see what it is.
See, I question whether it will ever happen, and I don't know if it's just wishful thinking on my part, but the idea that excites me the most about the future of the universe is if they get to that point and choose not to recast. Because there's this thing
and just
in the
have them
comics,
age,
or just pass down these titles. I mean, they're never going to stop running out of characters to introduce.
Right.
And Marvel, as a publishing company now, is mostly an idea incubator for the movies, right? I mean, the comics work on their own, but financially, that's such a small sliver of what that company does that I think Disney justifies Marvel publishing as many titles as it does because it's free sort of R&D for story ideas. But what excites me, and is something that the comics aren't forced to do. There's constantly shakeups. There's constantly characters dying and then coming back to life. And you go to the Wikipedia entry for any Marvel character and you find out, 5 different characters have actually held that title at different points in time.
Right.
But they eventually always reset. Captain America will come back to life, or he'll thaw out of the ice, or he'll leave, the cave he's been living in and reclaim the shield. Because it doesn't cost any money to hire someone new to write and someone new to draw Captain America.
Right.
They can just take him off the bench.
Yeah.
But Chris Evans will age and will not want to do these movies anymore, whether it's at the end of Endgame or whether it's at the end of the 6-picture deal. We'll realize he signed after Endgame. Either way, he can't do these forever. But the question is the Marvel brand so strong that unlike something like Batman, where we constantly need someone to be playing Batman, you can't just have each new iteration of Batman be a pass down of the past, take on Batman. Could we get to a scenario in which Captain America is always part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but he's never Steve Rogers again, where he does become Bucky? Or Sam Wilson, or any of the other characters who have played Captain America, or the characters who haven't played Captain America yet, you know? Because the universe is bigger than any one character at this point, and the characters are bigger than any one, or let me say this, the iconography of the characters and what they represent is bigger than the actual specific characters in so many ways that a lot of people have talked about how you can kind of see, okay, so is Black Panther going to be the new Captain America?
Right.
And is Doctor Strange the new Iron Man? And is Captain Marvel sort of the new Thor?
Yep.
Are they replacing the sort of key original Avengers with analogs in terms of personality types and power sets and even facial hair and whatever, kind of one-to-one, people with nationalistic senses of pride, whatever it is. But what excites me the most is the idea that whenever Robert Downey Jr. stops playing Iron Man, Tony Stark is done.
Right.
And the universe goes on for however many decades it goes on until, all the ice caps melt. But Iron Man will always be a constant, and Tony Stark will always be a guy we reference as a past.
Right.
And you're moving forward the way that actual TV does, something like ER does, where it's like, well, when that actor has a contract that can't be met, they leave and they come in with 2 new doctors. And you're maintaining a sort of balance.
Right.
But, maybe George Clooney comes back from the finale.
Yeah.
Maybe Noah Wyle does like a couple episode arc, but...
And that's what's interesting to me, because while in so many ways they've been trying to replicate comic book storytelling, this could be the point where, it's
they
really
deviate. That becomes an actual sense of finality, of chapters ending and new chapters starting that would be exciting to me.
Yeah.
I would be thrilled if Robert Downey Jr. said, I will never do another one no matter how much they pay me. Yeah. Not because I'm tired of him being in them, because I want to see what they do if they can't pull him in.
Right.
If he doesn't exist as an option. And what my prayer is that they don't just pay Bradley Cooper $20 million to grow a goatee.
Matt?
Yeah. Honestly, dude, I don't know how you get so much grease so fast.
That just happens.
Okay. Matt, is it?
Yeah.
Can I get a little touch up too?
I mean, there's not a lot I can do for you, but you look great.
Thanks, buddy. I love you. So welcome back to our discussion with television streaming star Griffin Newman.
Web series star, please.
Web series.
Yeah, we're doing the same thing.
That's true.
An expensive web series.
Now that I think of it, I've never watched it on a television. Only a computer.
If you have.
Sometimes a phone.
Yeah.
So, but that's the future.
Yeah.
That's where we are now. Actually, weirdly natural pivot coming off of that. A thought that I've had recently about Marvel Studios going forward and the stuff that they make, because they have these Disney Plus shows coming up, which are intriguing to me.
Yeah.
Because as I talked about in the past video, some characters like Bucky, notably, really kind of get shafted because they just don't have the time in the movies to flesh him out and give him a story. And these TV shows seem like the natural place for that, to explore supporting characters, give them, their own storylines, build them up before they maybe take center stage in the movies. And because Marvel is just basically the biggest thing in film these days, they are the most influential.
I'd say in media, period.
Yeah, there's
in terms
nothing.
Of their full reach. Yeah.
Right. There's nothing everything they do is an event.
Yeah.
And what I don't think they'll do, but what I would love to see them do is, especially to just build out the universe and develop other the non-lead characters, is they could innovate with formats in multiple interesting ways, and they they used to do those one-shot short films just like on the Blu-rays that are just like, oh, here's like a little scene with Agent Coulson or something like that. But not much. They were basically just like little like side jokes pretty much. But I feel like they're in the position where they could make short films like important things that people actually like. If they since they can't really do the equivalent of like a single issue story in the comics because everything has to be a 2-hour $200 million movie. If they made like a 25-minute long little like short film and dropped it on Disney Plus and then built up the premiere of it, they could make these different types of these storytelling models like events and make them relevant in a way that they're just not, because no one gives a shit about short films.
Right.
But if it's a Marvel short film that's gonna like matter, I think that could be really interesting.
No, I agree with that, and I got excited when they started doing those one-shots, and obviously, I mean, Pixar has kind of like, you know, it's weird to me that more people haven't followed the Pixar short model. You have other animation studios that do it sometimes. But you know, I think short films are fun, and it would be cool if studios use them as incubators for things, for developing directorial talent and things like that. But with these cinematic universes, with things like Star Wars and Marvel, there's such an opportunity there to use short films to introduce new characters, or fill in gaps in the narratives, or flesh out characters who we haven't spent enough time with because they're not usually the lead, or any of these things that are one of the things that are fun about comics. That often, if there's a character that pops in a series, they might get a little side series,
right? You
know, or a one-off, or you know, a limited series, or any of those things. And they've sort of abandoned those one-shots. And Marvel TV up until this point has been siloed as its own thing because it wasn't run by Feige. It was run by Marvel Entertainment.
Right, which is why we have not addressed any of those in these videos because. Like the way I mean, like while I've watched some of like the Netflix shows and stuff like that, in terms of the MCU, I feel like if it's not a Feige production, it basically doesn't count. It might as well be in a separate universe.
Right. They kind of, sort of coexist.
Right. But like we've accepted that, you know, Steve Rogers is never gonna like. You know, I don't know, hire Jessica Jones for anything.
But the one exception to that is the Marvel show that I like the best, which was Agent Carter.
Yeah.
Which felt like what I hope the Disney Plus series will feel like. Because the Disney Plus series are being overseen by Feige and are going to feature the film actors and all of that. And Agent Carter was like exactly what I wanted, which is watching Captain America: The First Avenger. I go, man, this character rules. Haley Atwell in this character rules.
Yep.
Now she's gone because she's in the past. I wish we could spend more time with her. And this now feels like a weird spin-off series where it's her in an office in the 40s in New York. And I'm just like, this is something we're never going to get out of the movies.
Right.
And I like it being grounded and terrestrial, you know, dealing with the early days of these things and not having to carry as much story weight for building the entire universe out.
And then we haven't seen anything like that since.
Right, but I mean, the rumors that have come out about these Disney Plus streaming shows, you know, they're doing a Bucky and Cap show that they say is more of like...
Falcon.
Yes, sorry. Bucky and Falcon show. That's like a buddy cop midnight run type thing. And the Loki series that they're doing, which will be Hiddleston and everything, and is apparently like a Quantum Leap Doctor Who style, like him traveling around stuff. And it's
then like apparently a Scarlet Witch and Vision one.
Right.
Which for me, I'm like, I really wish that had been made like a couple of years ago, so I cared about their relationship going into Infinity War.
Because that's the problem is like there's a lot of in the movies sort of you just have to take this as a given. Scarlet Witch and Vision are in love. They've been in 3 movies together at this point.
Last time we saw them, they were fighting.
Right. They've had very limited interaction in the first 2. They were just sort of felt like they were teasing that they were going to get together. And then their entire relationship happens in between Civil War and Infinity War. In between wars, they apparently fall in love and shack up in a small European apartment.
Right.
And have this whole relationship that we don't get to see. And that's what's cool about the model that's now been created with Marvel. What was cool about the comics is you can go back and pick up a trade and fill in that backstory, color in that side, or if a character's popping, you can go, let's do the series that's about this other aspect of their personality or their job in a different tone. And this thing that was, that's fun of like, there are multiple Spider-Man titles at any given point in time. And those titles, this is the mainline one. And this one isn't out of continuity, but this one is the one that they go, we want this one to be funnier. Or we want this one to be more tech-based.
Yeah.
Or this is more about his relationship with Mary Jane. Or more about him at the Daily Bugle. Or more about him with supervillains. Or whatever it is. And when you can really allow someone to go, you don't have to make the definitive thing. We want you to use these characters to have fun with them and do something new with them. That's when I get excited at the malleability of the Marvel Universe. These things don't have to always be events. Because I remember...
That, honestly, what you just said there, that is the thing that I wish Marvel would, embrace.
Right.
They don't all have to be events.
Right, and I'm surprised that it took this long for them to make a Black Widow movie.
Yeah.
Because I remember saying after Avengers, that's such a slam dunk. Just do a Black Widow and Hawkeye movie for $60 million. And it will do well because they're big characters, but you can keep it kind of grounded and tactile and all of that. But I think the thing that scares them off of doing that is the bar is so high that if the movie doesn't make $1 billion, does it feel lesser than?
Well, this is the question that I want to ask now, to kind of expand it beyond just Marvel.
But TV might be the opportunity, Disney Plus, for them to do all of that.
I think it's such an opportunity.
Yeah.
I hope that they embrace it.
Right.
But beyond just the MCU movies, the superhero genre as a whole and the future of it, because it now dominates just so much of modern media.
Yeah.
It is and a thing that I see getting thrown around a lot is superhero movies are to this decade what the Western was to the the 40s and 50s and
musicals in the 30s, any of these
Right.
things. Right, yeah.
And that never seems to me quite like a really great comparison, because back then, 60% of the Westerns were not being overseen and made by the same group of people and all intersecting.
Yeah.
And so that genre was able to evolve a lot more. And so you look at, you get, the Searchers and you get High Noon and stuff like that, where it is they're using the genre to reflect back and comment on the genre.
Right.
And because of just the nature of pretty much all the superhero movies we get now, they're going to be Marvel movies, where they have to be first and foremost Marvel movies and serve the larger Marvel Cinematic Universe, or they are DC movies, which are actually evolving in a really weird and fascinating way right now.
Yeah.
And there's very little room for anything else that's not part of those two. And a thing that I've been thinking about a lot, I think actually since last fall, you hosted a screening of Ang Lee's Hulk.
Yeah.
And
the weirdest superhero movie that will ever be made.
The weirdest one. And I was there, and I hadn't watched the movie since it was in theaters.
Yeah.
And I liked it more than you love it.
I love it. It's
like it.
Obviously a very strange film that is not for most people.
Right.
Yeah.
But I've been wondering constantly since then, will we ever get an Ang Lee Hulk?
I don't think we will. And I think the word you use that's key is overseen. The difference between Westerns and superhero movies is that any superhero franchise, whether it's on TV, whether it's in film, whatever universe it is connected to, it's overseen by someone. These are viewed as brand management properties. And Westerns, John Wayne starred in more movies than anyone ever. I mean, I think that's literally the stat that in terms of being the star of the film, he has more starring vehicles than anyone ever, because he did 6 of them a year. And they were programmers, and sometimes the director would come in and sneak some stuff into them.
Right.
And put some really interesting craft into them, and cast really interesting actors. And they would get away with it because they said, if it's John Wayne and he's wearing a hat on the poster, we can sell it. That was the franchise. That was the thing. So directors could come in and use John Wayne as a vehicle to talk about American identity,
right.
But now there's so much oversight. over these things. That I don't think you'll ever get anything as individualistic as Ang Lee's Hulk again. Because that is an example of a movie where they just went, we don't know what these things are.
Right.
I mean, James Schamus tells this story. He told it when we had him on for the screening, that they were developing that movie pretty much simultaneous with Spider-Man. And he had just made Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which was him and Ang Lee together, which was this bizarre breakthrough blockbuster that was also a deeply spiritual subtitled foreign language film. And so people went like, I don't know, people seem to like this thing. Why not let them do that with Hulk? So they did this really psychologically based, fraught, like this kind of Edward Albee version of the Hulk that's like this super terse family drama with a very, very bizarre visual style.
He fights his dad in the clouds.
Because there was no model for them to follow in terms of what these movies were. And they were filming the movie at the time that Spider-Man came out. Mm-hmm. And by Schamus's own account, he goes to see Spider-Man opening weekend in Times Square, and the movie ends with Spider-Man grabbing onto the American flag, you know, hanging off the side of the flagpole. He's not grabbing it Donald Trump style. He is being Spider-Man adjacent to the American flag, you know, 6 months after 9/11, and the entire audience cheers, and he walks out of the theater, calls Ang Lee, and says, "We're fucked." And Ang Lee says, "Why?" And he goes, "This is a genre now. Mm-hmm. This isn't us just making a movie based off of source material. There are now expectations of how these movies function."
Yeah.
And he knew from that moment they were screwed because they weren't making that movie. They took the Hulk and said, what's the most interesting thing we could use the Hulk to say? In the same way that John Ford would look at John Wayne and say, what's the most interesting thing I can use John Wayne to say?
Right.
And now, you know, it's only gotten more and more the case where you have to make a very kind of a literal, sort of accessible, and manageable interpretation of the character.
Right.
That can be quality controlled and, you know, sustainable.
Yeah.
And translatable and universal and all of that.
Right. It's like, it's funny now thinking back to superhero movies of the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Because the batting average these days is a lot higher.
Yeah.
There's a lot more good
Sure.
ones. I mean, like there's,
Yeah.
in general, more of them are good than bad nowadays.
Right.
And back then, there were a lot of bad ones.
Right.
And but then you got cases like the Ang Lee Hulk, or honestly, it was 2005 that Christopher Nolan made a Batman movie,
Right.
and where they did their singular take.
Yeah.
And those seem way less likely now. But I feel like
And the take is the key word, you know?
Right.
Because even like, I'm very excited for Matt Reeves doing the new Batman.
Yeah.
But it feels like the whole approach is we want to make the core Batman from the comics you've never seen in a movie before. Mm-hmm. Whereas Ang Lee and Christopher Nolan both felt like they went, can I use these characters to say some other things?
Right.
Can I put my specific take on these characters into the world? And I don't know if we're ever going to get that again, where the main impetus isn't you have to give me the perfect translation of this character from the comics,
right,
and make the movie that the fans have in their mind.
Yeah, and and the one potential opportunity is because so looking at how the movies link up to the comics, pretty much all of them that are made now are pretty much adaptations of like the core ongoing series, like Marvel and DC Universe comics. But then in the comics, a lot of the stories that are often considered like the best, like superhero stories, are the Elseworlds stories, the out of continuity, your
What
dark,
if? Right.
The what ifs, your Dark Knight Returns is, your All-Star Supermans, where they don't have. They can kill the characters. They can be set in the future. They can do their own thing. And I feel like the one of those that we've had was Logan, pretty much. Which, I mean, they got a Best Screenplay nomination at the Oscars.
Yeah.
And it was
and
very...
it's also, cut this out, but it's secretly a Western.
No way. What?
Go back and watch it.
But then that one, it did really well. People
Yes.
liked it.
Yeah.
And that was like pretty much an out-of-continuity, weird,
Right.
like alternate future Wolverine story.
And I think they only got away with that because everyone was like, well, the thing's done. He's not going to play the character anymore. So what do we have to lose?
Right. I mean, and also just the Fox X-Men franchise was such chaos
Sure.
that they could make that happen
Yeah.
there. And similarly, we're getting later this year Todd Phillips's Joker movie
Yeah.
starring Joaquin Phoenix that
Right.
is out of any continuity, that is just a filmmaker doing his take on a character
Right.
free of having to connect to any other movie.
It doesn't have to shake hands with anything else. And when that movie was announced, I thought, this is the worst idea I've ever heard.
Yep.
And it's now one of the movies I'm most excited to see this year.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because, and
whether or not it's good, it's like kind of what I want these films to be doing. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's sort of the double-edged sword of having an interconnected cinematic universe in this kind of way, is that there has to be a sort of compatibility, you know?
Right.
Across the line, and you can't have anyone really take a hard stance, throw out a hard take on anything. And the idea that it's just these two guys, you know, like Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix, along with their producers and their writers and the rest of the cast, Robert De Niro, just
I can't believe this movie exists.
spent 5 months, 6 months filming a Joker movie. And that's all they had to worry about, was that one movie they were making.
And-
Which is the same thing as when, you know, you write All-Star Superman. And you
Right.
go, my job here is they gave me this number of issues. I don't have to feed into anything else before. I can pick anything I want from what happened before me. I can throw anything I want out. Once it's done, it's done. And those stories are always the things that last. I mean, that have the most stickiness in the comics.
Right, like literally last year, DC launched a new line of like a new publishing line just to make stories like that.
Yeah.
Just because they realized like, oh, these are the ones that sell the best
Yeah.
and that get the most acclaim. What if we just did a line of like those like out of continuity stories
Right.
with where we let the creators do whatever they want.
And Marvel had that with the Ultimate Universe, which ultimately was undone by it becoming as complicated as the original universe.
Exactly.
But the thing that was exciting to people was they're starting at a ground level. It's focused.
Right.
Nothing is taken as a given. We have to introduce these elements back on the board one by one and choose what we're going to keep, what we're going to update, what we're going to skewer, what we're going to remove. And then, 12 years later, it became its own sort of unwieldy mass.
Right, and they had to blow it up.
Right.
And I do wonder if this bizarre Todd Phillips Joker movie is potentially the future of like if this genre in film is going
Sure.
to evolve, is this going to be like the first step in that happening?
I mean, everything I hear points towards that being how DC wants to run things.
Right.
I mean, Wonder Woman is very different from Aquaman.
Yeah, and in an hour and 20 minutes, I'm gonna go see Shazam,
Which
and
is, I've heard only great things.
Yeah.
And sounds completely different and totally incompatible from those two movies we just mentioned.
Right.
And Patty Jenkins is going around saying that Wonder Woman 2 isn't really a sequel, which I think the reason why they're saying that is because it's not a sequel in the way we've come to expect from things like the Marvel movies.
Yeah.
It's definitely a sequel because it's a continuation of this character in this universe.
Right.
But it's not a literal, here's the next thing that happened. And it sounds like it's going to be very different in tone. It's set 40 years later, if not more, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
84.
right. So all these things, that make the DC universe kind of exciting now of James Wan can just do whatever insane underwater spectacle
Right.
he wants to do. And he can make a weird horror movie off to the side.
they've basically just stopped worrying about keeping them all connected.
Right.
And so while Marvel's thing is they are all connected, everything matters because it's all one big ongoing story,
Right.
the DC one seems to be just like who gives a shit? And of course this is after they really tried very hard to connect it all for a while and
Right.
people didn't love it.
Because, I sit there opening night at Suicide Squad and Jared Leto's Joker comes on screen. I go, fuck, am I going to have to live with this for 10 years? It's not just that I don't like this performance or the way they've designed this character, But the fact that I'm just like, how much of a commitment is this going to be for me now? How many of these things is he going to do? Am I going to have to keep track of this Joker?
Right.
The thing that's exciting to me about the Todd Phillips Joaquin Phoenix Joker is if it's bad, then it's bad. And I never have to think about it again.
Right.
If it's good, then it's good. And I also don't have to think about it again because what are the odds of them doing a sequel? I don't have to keep up with anything.
And what really interests me about it is like, I assume it will do well because Joker's one of those characters like Venom, where it's like, oh, it's the villain that people like love way too much, and it'll just make money.
Sure.
And
it's very twisted.
That's what I hear.
Yeah.
And if it does well, that means that audiences will have accepted the thing that studios were always afraid that they wouldn't be able to accept, which is just a different version of a character.
Right. So you go, what is the franchise here? This is the conversation that kind of excites me about what could happen. What is the franchise here? Is the franchise the ongoing series of adventures and mishaps and crazy crimes that Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, lands upon? Or is the franchise finding interesting people to make one movie with characters that we all know?
Right.
Because the character is the star of the thing anyway. I mean, that's the brand, and you can attach exciting people to it. But I don't know if I need to live in a universe where someone is setting up a new 4-film Batman saga where one actor and one director is going to take us through that journey. I'd kind of be more into every 2 years there's a totally different Batman movie.
Right.
Because the star is Batman. The franchise is that Batman's going to be in the movie.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be another version, another chapter of the last Batman I saw.
Right.
And, I just keep on hearing that DC is like actively looking at things, all their sort of Elseworlds stories. And trying to bring people in and go, what would you do if you only had to make one Superman movie? Which also then becomes more appealing to, I think, a lot of actors who don't want to get tied down to some franchise that they have so little control off of.
Right.
I mean, it's the thing, I mostly work in television, and it's very stressful when you sign up for a job and you don't know the story. If you make a movie, whether it's good or bad, there's pretty much a script, and it might be changed, but you know the film you're setting out to make. But anytime if you are lucky enough to be cast on a TV show, you sign like a 5-year contract that says if they snap their fingers, you have to show up and you have to do the stuff that we've written for you.
Right.
And maybe it starts out great, and then 3 seasons later, all the writers you like have quit, and no one knows what they're doing, and you're still contractually obligated to play this character. It doesn't make sense anymore. Maybe it starts out bad and doesn't get good until 3 years in when they bring new people in.
Right.
But either way, you have very little control over what you're doing, and you don't have this full sense of the character in your head because it could constantly be negated. I've had things, The Tick is a very weird example because it's a show run by the guy who created the comic book.
Yeah.
And has run every version of this character, but also treats each version like what we're talking about, where he just goes, this is its own thing. The malleability of the Tick and Arthur as archetypes is what I want to work with, not continuing the last story I told last time. And so he's a guy who I trust implicitly because I go, well, I love this thing. I grew up watching it. I wear the stupid clothing of it. I owned it before I even got cast on the show. Not this, because this was promotional. But it's not that exciting to me to just redo the things I watched on the cartoon as a kid.
Right.
What's exciting to me is reading a script and going, this is a totally new character that I get to play and stake my claim over. And if you're an actor signing up to play Batman for 5 movies, that's like a real dicey proposition in terms of how much am I going to get to say with this character? How much control am I going to have over it? Versus, Joaquin Phoenix, who has been offered, Marvel wanted him to play the Hulk for Avengers. Marvel wanted him to play Doctor Strange. DC has tried to get him to play Lex Luthor. They keep courting him, and he just said, I don't know, I don't want to do this. I'm a weirdo, and I like sitting in the corner and punching myself in the chest to get worked up for a scene. And I don't know if I could have control over this thing. And the idea of getting better people to sign up for these movies, or even, not better people, because there are tons of great filmmakers who have made superhero movies in the last 10 years where I go, that doesn't feel like one of their movies.
Right.
And it's because they couldn't really let their freak flag fly, for lack of a better term.
So this is actually the next segue I want to make, since we talked a bit about television. And looking at the TV shows premiering this year, Well, there is The Tick returning.
April 5th, worldwide.
April 5th.
10 episodes all at once.
On Amazon.
Exclusively.
Yes. And also, after The Tick, there is Watchmen on HBO, and then The Boys. Is The Boys one also on Amazon?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, and these are all comic book adaptations, and they're all adaptations of comics that are sort of like commentaries on the superhero genre.
Sure.
And it seems interesting to me that now we're reaching this point where the movies don't seem to be evolving very much. They seem to just be getting better at doing their same kind of thing. Now on TV show, we're getting this sort of like self-reflexive superhero shows that are either like satires or they're just commentaries in some way, and they're doing new things with it. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about, as someone who literally stars in one of these shows, about if we're going to see more evolution in terms of like superhero media on TV.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. I think, to some degree, these things just go in cycles. Like, it was very bizarre how, Civil War and Batman vs. Superman came out within, like, 2 months of each other. And it was like, oh, so are these all just, like, superheroes fighting each other now? There's certain types of stories that we like. But I also think, you're at a point where these sort of self-reflexive, satirical, postmodern takes on superheroes have always existed in comics. Because in comics, you're playing to an audience that presumably also reads all of those comics and are so well versed in the tropes and the types of the characters and the storytelling cycles and all of that they have enough of a base frame of reference for you to be able to riff from there and for them to understand what you're deviating from. And I think we've gotten to a point where, because it has become such a like omniculture of just superhero media, and these like stories are baked into our bones now, that you can do the TV shows and the movies that are the adaptations of the satires on the comics, because now the things that were being satirized are also common knowledge based. I'm getting off basic human language here.
I know what you're saying, though.
Yeah, I mean, there was like an interesting thing. The Tick, when it started as a comic book, Ben Edlund only did 12 issues before they sold it to be a cartoon show, because it was in the post Ninja Turtles like mad dash for find me an underground comic book and let's put it on Saturday morning.
Which is funny because Ninja Turtles also
was a satire.
Yeah.
Ninja Turtles was making fun of the grimdark,
of
edgy,
and also like was it ninjas from Daredevil at the time, mutants or teen mutants from mutants from X-Men, and then teens from Teen Titans.
Right.
And those were the biggest comics of like the mid 80s.
Right. I mean, it was a goof. It was like a drawing that I don't remember if it was Eastman or Laird who drew it the first time and said, "What do you think about this?" And they said, like, "Yeah, we should play this out. Let's run the rest of this bit out." And the Tick was a similar thing for Ben. He created the Tick when he was 16 years old.
Jesus.
And it was the joke of, well, they've run out of cool things to name a superhero after. We got Ant-Man, we got Spider-Man, we had the Wasp. How far down do you move to a character that not only like doesn't strike fear into the heart of men, but just sounds like a fucking pain in the ass? And that was the joke of the Tick. And then it evolved and became a more fully formed sort of parody of the kind of, Superman, Adam West Batman, can-do optimism, very black and white, good guys versus bad guys, and sort of the long soliloquies of the sort of soul-searching superheroes of, the 60s more than anything. And it has become this whole thing, but he's always tried to make it sort of, like a funhouse mirror of whatever's going on in superhero media at the time. So the comic book was riffing off of Frank Miller and Daredevil a lot. And there's this character Paul the Samurai and this character Oedipus. Oedipus is like a parody of Elektra. You're dealing with the sort of like the hand and that sort of thing. But when they went to Saturday morning, the kids watching the cartoon wouldn't have understood the things they were parodying because they were parodying things from comic books. So the cartoon was more parody of other Saturday morning superhero cartoons, which you had the X-Men cartoon on at that point, and the Spider-Man cartoon, and Batman the Animated Series, and there was a reference base. Even though kids, you go, why would you be trying to write satire for kids? They understand what you're riffing off of because they know what the normal thing is.
Yeah, that programming block on Fox Kids that's what I grew up with.
Right, and Ben said that he felt, the permutation of the Tick that he struggled most with was the Warburton show because it wasn't really tethered to anything. Because it came out the year after X-Men and the year before Spider-Man, and there wasn't really a sort of bread base, if you will, for what live-action superhero things were in the modern era. But to bring it back now, it was the idea of we can make fun of a hero's journey because people know what the hero's journey is and how it relates to superheroes and the iconography and how villains should behave and all these sorts of things. I think it's natural that, these things constantly evolve with the public's understanding and tolerance for it.
Yeah.
So the more the audience is working with, the further you can, even if you don't, you can push these stories because everyone's coming in with a really deep sort of baseline understanding of the tropes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so, it's interesting seeing now this happening, like this being a big year for that happening on TV. And I'm looking forward to the Tick coming back. I'm real excited about the Lindelof Watchmen show because I don't know what that's going to be, and I'm wondering now, when or if we're going to start seeing movies that do a similar sort of thing. I think the closest we've really gotten to that recently is the way that Spider-Verse uses comic books within. Within the narrative of the film, and that actually does, and that assumes that we all know the classic origin story, and is able to remix it.
Okay,
and use
let's
it in
do
new
this
ways.
for the last time. Is a joke on the fact that everyone has seen too many origin stories, and we know how it works, and that the movie keeps on promising they're not going to make you see another origin story, but they get abbreviated every time because we get the basic essentials enough. We can strip it down to its bare parts and not have to spend all that time coming up with Penny Parker's origin. You can kind of take it as a given because we know the basic cycles of how one becomes a spider person.
Right.
So then you can just run from there and have fun in a way that movie just goes places, that other movies don't. That feel, I guess, the need to be a little more didactic in how they do things. I mean, the other obvious example is, and once again, you're going to have to cut this out, Deadpool knows that he's in a movie. Deadpool knows that he's in a movie, so he's kind of...
And
he's in on it.
do you think he knows that he's part of Disney now?
Yeah. And he knows that we're talking about him now. Deadpool knows that he's part of a YouTube film video essay.
This would be a great time for Deadpool to crash in through the window, but we don't have the budget for that.
We don't have the budget for that, but you know what? It's almost like Deadpool would crash through the window and say sorry, you guys can't afford me.
Yeah.
But we can't even afford
We
that.
can't.
But that's what he would say if we could afford him.
Exactly. By the way, if anyone watching this is just great at CGI,
Yeah. You want to throw
by all
Mr.
means.
Pool?
I mean, we've got a locked off camera shot, so
Yeah.
it's not that hard to composite in.
Yeah.
Just take it, send it to me.
DP right here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And he's holding up a sign that's I don't know, rate, review, and subscribe.
that would be great.
Yeah.
Oh my god, we would get so many Patreon donors if that happened. But so it's not going to happen.
No, not going to happen.
But yeah, and it is interesting looking at things like that, the way they happen, Deadpool and maybe to a greater extent, Spider-Verse, they still manage to happen with big IPs.
Yeah.
And so it can happen, but it seems like Spider-Verse only happened because Sony didn't know what to do with their animation department, and they were Lord and Miller, make whatever you want.
And Ryan Reynolds single-handedly pushed Deadpool up a hill for 10 years.
Yeah.
Right. Everyone was trying to not make that movie.
Right.
Right.
And it happened because a thing leaked.
Right.
And so I'm really curious about the future of superhero films because it seems in so many ways they are becoming more and more the studios want them to be more homogenous, more controlled,
right.
And then there are these little things that peek out and manage to escape. There are these TV shows happening, and I'm curious to see if 3 years down the road if we have movies that are like The Tick.
Yeah.
And so I don't know.
I don't know either, but I know that's the thing that's most exciting about comics is being able to walk into a comic book store and whether it's part of this universe or under this publishing label or what have you, see a bunch of different books that look really different and that have different characters or sometimes have the same character used in a different way and different writing styles, different sensibilities. And, that always existed. And Marvel wasn't worried about all of their comics looking the same. Mm-hmm. We take it as a given that different artists are going to draw different characters different ways. So if Batman shows up in Superman, he's going to look different than he does in Detective Comics.
Right.
And we accept that. And I wish the movies could kind of start approaching these characters with that kind of confidence.
So the weird effect of just recent superhero movies, especially Marvel ones, is that I found myself getting more into the comics than usual. Like I have read comics continuously. I go to the store every week, pick up my pull list. But my main reaction after seeing Infinity War was man, I really want to kind of read the 70s Avengers stuff that I haven't read. And I've become newly appreciative of the stuff that comics can do that movies are trying to do but can't quite. And just and the more these go on, I kind of realize you know what, it's cool that these are happening and they exist and I enjoy them, and for a lot of people it is their gateway to these characters and stories, and it's their primary source. But they're never going to quite be able to do what the comics do, and I'm just and I'm glad that I have I've been into the comics for as long as I have, and that these are going to keep on happening so I can enjoy them there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's weird, for all the talk we've had about, is Marvel like TV? Is it more like the comics? Is it more like sports? Is it more like fast foods? Any of this? I think my major frustration, once again, with a franchise of 20 films, the majority of which I like a lot, is that they start to feel less like movies. And I don't need movies to feel exactly how a comic book universe feels, because the comic books exist.
Right.
What I want is something that is an intersection between everything I like about 2-hour narrative cinema and everything I like about superhero storytelling. I don't want the movies to start to feel like single issues.
Right.
Or, different parts of a big event or anything like that. It's very cool when they're able to pull off the trick of also doing that. But the thing that I worry about is when we're losing the integrity of a movie on its own. And I think there's a bit of that in TV too, where, TV used to be designed in a way where you could watch any episode and it would probably work for you. Because things would just get rerun in random orders and you couldn't buy a box set or DVR it all or stream it all. And so there would be, stories that would build over time, but also any episode had some sort of inherent integrity of its own as a story. And I want a little bit more out of that, out of superhero movies.
Yeah.
And I guess Marvel movies in particular. So that when you step back and look at the whole thing, it's impressive. But if you look at any one thing, that one thing is so satisfying on its own that I wouldn't need to see anything else.
Exactly.
And I think that's one of the reasons why Black Panther's the most successful movie they've ever made. Because I saw it with my two friends who don't like Marvel movies and had not seen a single other Marvel movie. And the only point in the film where I had to lean over to them and explain something was the end credits, where they just went, "Who is this guy?"
Right.
But for the rest of the film, they were just watching this one story with characters they got to know. They were introduced to at the beginning of that story. Didn't matter that Black Panther's been in Civil War. They knew everything they needed to know about this guy from the beginning of that movie, and it resolves its own narrative concerns.
Right. And the end isn't only satisfying because it seems like it's going to change the larger universe.
No, the end is satisfying because of the way that T'Challa has grown.
Right.
As a human being.
That's all we want.
That's what we want.
And so I think we've solved most of that.
Okay.
But I do
We've
want
solved it. We have solved it.
We've solved
definitively.
it. Look, I'm pretty sure that Kevin Feige is going to watch this video and take a lot of notes and be like, that's what I got to do.
These two guys have solved the most successful movie franchise of all time.
Exactly.
Something clearly was amiss.
Yeah.
They needed to fix it. And two guys who clearly just want to make their own superhero movies.
Exactly. And by the way, I want to make something very clear to the camera. I will gladly take back every single thing I've said in all of these videos if I ever get the chance to make one of these movies. I'll apologize publicly. I'll take it all back because Kevin, please let me make a movie. I think I do a good job.
This camera right here. Hi, Kevin Feige. I am willing to not only delete this video, but my entire social media presence in every episode of my podcast if you let me play Nightcrawler in the third casting of Nightcrawler when the X-Men become integrated into the MCU.
Yeah, just want to put that on the record.
I'll change my name. I'll go into witness relocation. I'll disown everything I've said previously. Please hire me and let me play Nightcrawler.
I think that's a pretty strong case.
Cool.
But the last thing I want to ask you, can you tell me about season 2 of The Tick and why everyone watching this video should watch that?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're watching this video, you're probably someone who overthinks superhero media. And The Tick is the show for those people. I mean, The Tick and Arthur are these weird characters because The Tick is essentially a child doing an impression of a superhero brought to life, you know? And Arthur is someone who thinks a lot about morality and justice and how things should work and is terrified of actually doing anything. So Tick is all sort of positive energy and action without much interiority, and Arthur is a lot of strategic thinking in this tiny, frail body that I possess. And so they function as interesting yin and yang, I think, for what we like about superheroes. And what we want out of them, why we are so interested in them as a culture. It's also got a lot of funny jokes. We fight a giant lobster monster. It's a fun show. And this season, if you've watched season 1, is about sort of the dealing with the bureaucracy of a SHIELD type agency, which I think is really funny. It's like 10 episodes about how difficult it is to file all the paperwork necessary to be a superhero within the system.
So we all agree that's what Winter Soldier was missing.
Paperwork.
And now we're gonna get it.
And people think I'm joking when I say this. So much paperwork. When people ask me what the most difficult part of filming season 2 was, and I herniated a disc in my back filming season 2, without fail, the most difficult part was memorizing dialogue about different forms. Which forms I had filed and which ones I hadn't.
I was already looking forward to this, and now I'm so much more excited.
Paperwork heavy. It's like it becomes clear that Arthur's superpower, because he was an accountant before the Tick discovered him, is how good he is at paperwork. And I am incapable of doing paperwork without having a panic attack. And it was the acting challenge of my life.
I love it.
Yeah.
So that's our pitch. It is it is the most paperwork heavy superhero show, thing you're going to get in 2019.
Yes, it's the most high stakes paperwork event of the year.
I love it. And when and where can people see it?
April 5th. All 10 episodes. All at once. Everywhere in the world.
On
Amazon Prime exclusively.
Yes.
Wait, but I'm not an Amazon Video subscriber. If you're a Prime subscriber, you got video.
Yeah.
You already got it, and season 1 is streaming now.
So you can, after you watch this video, catch up on season 1. Yeah, so you'll be ready.
A quick 12, a gentleman's 12 episodes.
Half-hour episodes?
A nice, clean little,
I love it.
Little half hour.
I love it.
Yeah.
Griffin, thank you so much for being here.
I regret eating the half hour. I think that's the only thing I regret saying in the hour and a half we've just.
It's cool. We'll cut that out.
Cool. No, please keep it in and double it.
Where can people find the rest of your work on the internet, or is that?
I'm Griff Lightning on all social media platforms. Very ready to delete all of that if Kevin Feige calls. Blank Check with Griffin and David is my podcast. available wherever podcasts are found. We talk about directors' filmographies, but we also have a Patreon show where we do commentaries for franchises, and right now we're doing the MCU. Another feed I am very willing to delete if Kevin Feige hits me up.
I'm glad we have that on the record.
Cool.
And I think that is the end.
Great.
Thanks so much for being here. We solved superhero movies.
Done. Fixed. Done.
That's a wrap. Let's cut it.